Boom.
Hi, this is Kris Vallotton from Bethel Church in Redding, California. And we want to welcome you to the Fivefold Live. We've been talking to different people about the Fivefold Ministry. And in case you haven't been on any of our calls, the Fivefold Ministry, where we get this name Fivefold, is from Ephesians chapter 4, where Paul writes to the church of Ephesus and said that God has given some as apostles and some as prophets, some as evangelists, pastors, and teachers. So we see apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, teacher. It's where we get that title, Fivefold Ministry. And we've been talking about, with several other guests, about the inner function of the Fivefold Ministry. How do pastors and prophets and apostles and teachers and evangelists, how do they interact, and what is their roles, and what is their specific roles, and how can we cultivate a fivefold community and culture? And we had, if you saw the very first broadcast we did, we had Bill Johnson on as an apostle, and we talked about apostolic ministry and how he saw apostolic ministry and how he related to the other fivefold gifts. And then we had Kris Overstreet as an evangelist on, and he was wild and crazy. And he talked about the evangelist and a hunger for people. And he actually taught us how to lead someone to the Lord right there. Is no surprise to you, Danny. And we had Dan Fairley on as a fivefold teacher, and we interacted with Dan about how teachers and prophets and apostles and pastors interrelate, and that was just a real fun conversation. Dan is very funny and also very, very smart. And next week we're going to have Haley on, Haley Braun, who's going to talk to us about prophets and prophets interacting with other prophets, and prophetesses as women interacting in the church and in government and politics. And that's going to be a lot of fun to have Haley on. We really love Haley. Today we have Danny Silk, and Danny and I don't know how long we've known each other, but I knew you BC, before Christ, before you were a Christian, and we worked together when you were 16, and we worked in a tire shop, and I was the back shop manager, and you were in the front. And that was a lot of fun. So we've been together a lot of years. Danny,
42 years.
Has it been 42 years?
42 years ago, yeah.
And then Danny was the pastor of Mountain Chapel, which is the church that Bill pastored as the senior pastor, and I ministered at. And you were there. How many years were you pastor there? I can't even remember.
Just under 6 years.
It was 6 years there with your wife, Sherry. And so Danny's a fivefold pastor. And then we brought him to Bethel, and he oversaw and built the structure, the pastoral structure inside of Bethel Church, and just really brought pastoral care and all the strategy and structure of not just being a pastor, but actually reproducing pastors. So Danny, that was a long introduction, but welcome to the conversation, and I'm so glad that you're here with us.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. This is going to be fun.
It is going to be fun. And you're going to do, I didn't tell you this, but you're going to do most of the talking, which you typically do dominate most of our conversations, but that's a joke. I'm the more talkative one in our relationship. But I want to talk to you a little bit about what, from your perspective, can you tell me what the difference is, and not just theologically, but also relationally, between pastors and prophets and the way they relate to the body, the way they receive instruction from the Lord, and their roles? Can you just open that up and just begin to talk about it?
Yeah, I think that within the context of the fivefold, there are those anointings that really are closer to the earth. They're more favored and focused with the earth, and then there's those anointings that are more favored and focused with heaven. And I think the apostle and prophet are those that are more focused and attuned to the activity of heaven, and therefore actually have more favor, and authority flows through those who are so focused on the movement of heaven. Just like the evangelist and the pastor really have so much favor and authority with people. And so when there's a decision to be made, the people are going to look to their pastors and teachers as, like, tell us what to do, tell us what that means, tell us where to stand. Tell us where it's
Yeah.
safe. Tell us where, what's biblical. Tell us what's what's theological, and so I think that's one of the reasons that so many churches end up with a pastor-teacher leadership structure, because those who are so focused on heaven and carry that authority, they are, in a sense, they're separated from that favor and authority with people. And so this is the need for the fivefold to work together, is so that heaven can move earth through that flow.
That's really good. And you talked about the difference, like I've heard you teach many times, yeah, actually on this very subject. And you talked about the difference in the way that the fivefold ministers actually would view a challenge or a problem, or not necessarily even something negative, but just life in general. Why don't you, I'd love for you just to at least kind of bridge that conversation with relationship with the pastor, the prophet, and the apostle. How would you view those, handling an issue, handling a problem, and interacting with just the congregation in general, responsibility and also perspectives?
I think you're referring to that. There's a story in the Culture of Honor, that book,
Yeah,
that
I love that.
the fivefold arrive at the scene of a car accident, and so the the apostle, he has he wants to raise them from the dead, make sure everybody gets healed. He's releasing miracles and signs and wonders, and the pastor is very concerned about, is everybody okay? Is this a safe scene? Should we drag people away from the explosion? Should we tend to the to the trauma that's going on in people's lives? And the prophet is taking a look at, really, where are the powers and principalities that have twisted up and or at war that would cause this scene. And I think that over and over, we're going to naturally, I don't mean that we can't learn other anointings or other behaviors, but naturally, without even trying, the prophets are looking at the spirit realm lit up, and the activity of the spirit realm and the voice of God in that. And the pastors naturally are looking at the people and the condition, the needs, the dynamics, the relationships of the people. So I think that when we work those together, we end up teaching the people to have a healthy interaction with the voice of God, the spirit realm, and with each other.
Yeah, that's really good. What do you think the challenges are you face as a pastor, with the apostles and prophets? Like, what's the greatest challenge that you have? You're trying to shepherd people from the standpoint of your office, which is a pastor, that's your call, and your teams, which are highly pastoral. And the prophets are, I think we have a reputation for, like, we drop bombs, mess up the culture, and and we're the people that are like, you're in a bad mood. Oh, you must be a prophet, which we know that's not true. But there tends to be this. We tend to disrupt. I would say prophets are inherently disruptors of culture, not necessarily intentionally, but I think that process that you described, where the prophet and the apostle are so attached to the heavenly mindset, that sometimes they can be earthly impractical, I think, and also the pastors tend to be the ones that are left with, how do we process this, and how do we actually apply this word, and how do we move people forward? Kind of, Moses comes down from the mountain and says, we're going to the promised land. And the pastors are like, oh, how are we going to do that? Right?
Yeah, Mary's having a baby.
Mary's having a baby. Exactly.
So yeah, I think that the success or the demise of this flow, heaven to earth, really has everything to do with the honor that the leaders have for each other in their differences. What we tend to do is we tend to be afraid of people who don't see the world the way we do, and in that fear, we stop listening, and we protect ourselves, and then we go to work to try to convince other people to be more like us. So when that dynamic starts escalating, then apostles and prophets, even they disagree. But then the teacher is either sucked up into uh, the prophet apostle supernatural world, or sucked down into the everybody be safe, everybody be right, everybody agree with the teacher. And so the teacher kind of goes back and forth in there, but heaven and earth are really linked through love and honor. So until the leaders are loving and honoring each other, those differences, they draw lines, they create separation, they create camps, and we then surround ourselves with ourselves and teach our people to be afraid of the other group. And so I think the biggest challenge again and again is learning to value what you don't understand, learning to listen to something that you wouldn't prioritize. Like, I wouldn't prioritize that we march around the property 7 times and put stakes in the ground and pour oil on our heads. I wouldn't prioritize that over, hey, let's make sure that we paid the rent. I think that, when that war starts in a leadership team, because people quit listening, that's really what stops the flow.
And by the way, we've never poured oil on our heads. Just to be clear.
There are no videos of that.
Just to be clear, like the next thing that we'll be hearing is like, those are the people who pour oil on their heads,
Yeah.
Which I guess is better than us being accused of sucking bodies out of a grave or whatever weird things. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I was thinking about the different ways that we get revelation from God. And I was having this interaction with Dan, because Dan and I have had this conversation many times privately where, for example, Dan reads the Bible and he's out of his reading, he gets revelation. The way for prophets often I see is that, at least in my life, is that I get revelation, then I look to the Bible to make sure, it isn't anti the scripture or find scripture. And I noticed from working with you for all these years, you often look at the people and think through, like, what are the people needing right now to bring health and wholeness? And often you're feeding the people much like a doctor would, like, here's the ingredients that they need right now to get healthy. Is that a fair rendition of, in a generalized sense, of how pastors interact with the Bible, the flock, do you think?
I think so. I think that's good. I think it would be like, if I recognize nutritionally, that there's symptoms in someone's body, then I go, oh, well, they're missing vitamin this or that, and which actually what they need is an infusion of, or they need to get out in the sun more, or whatever. I'm assessing and appraising the condition of the flock. And I think that I am studying and reading and learning, but then I have kind of a little toolbox that I open up and I pull out what I've learned. And I think growing up in a apostolic prophetic environment puts a apostolic prophetic layer on my pastor.
Yeah.
So I think even that changes the way that I would engage that conversation or that teaching or that dynamic. I think I would be paying attention to the spirit realm, the supernatural, but I would be, kind of like the way we introduced sozo was therapeutic, and it was to heal and to free people up, but it was in the confines of teaching them how to hear the voice of the Father. and then really let the Holy Spirit lead them rather than let a counselor lead them.
That's so good. Danny, what do you think? Well, what's the biggest problem you have with prophets? I mean, what are some of the challenges that you've had personally? Like just personal, like you've lived in a prophetic culture. I mean, you grew up, you got saved in a prophetic and apostolic culture. I mean, it was very young and embryonic, but it was definitely there. And you were, immediately after your salvation, immediately tagged as a pastor in our environment. I mean, you're a year, we're already seeing the shepherd's heart and the pastoring call, and you were newly saved. What's the challenges that you have with pastors, and what's the challenges that pastors like kind of speak to prophets right now? What are the, like, if you had something, like if you had an opportunity to share for 5 minutes to a group of prophets as a pastor and speaking to them as a pastor, what are the challenges that pastors have with prophets that are real?
I probably would, if I could generalize an issue, it would be that so many prophets have such sensitivity in relationships that they feel misunderstood, they feel rejected, they feel persecuted, and so they create a defensive wall called "the Lord told me," and it's
hey, don't be mad. Can we change the subject?
And so, I have such a hard time influencing a prophetic person because of their unawareness of their own rejection issues.
Yeah.
So learning to trust people, learning to communicate as owning your stuff instead of projecting your stuff in the name of the Lord on other people so you could control them, owning your own stuff and learning how to say, I feel hurt, I feel disconnected, I feel lonely, instead of the Lord says you're all rejecting the prophets and it's such a dance to help prophetic people learn to trust people instead of hiding in the Lord tells me and the Lord never hurts me.
The hyper spiritual thing.
Yeah, or some variety of that, because sometimes it comes across really hyper spiritual, and sometimes it just comes across really defensive.
Yeah, I remember one of the most painful conversations that I've ever had in my life was with you. You probably won't remember it because you were on the giving side of it. But
I've heard you tell this story before,
and you probably don't even remember it. It's like I have people tell stories like, Kris Vallotton said such and such and such to me, and it was really painful. I'm like, I have no memory of that. It didn't hurt me. Yeah. But we were in a restaurant in Weaverville, and I believe it was before you were actually pastor, but it could have been. And
it was after.
It was after you were pastor.
Yeah.
The opening statement that I remember, which may have not been the opening statement, but you said, I don't think you understand how you are affecting your environment. Now, I don't know if that was the open statement, was the first thing I remembered. And I was like, well, I don't know about that.
I'm burning.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I don't think that's true. Let me tell you what the Lord said about you. And you began to give me some really, very painful, actually, at the time, feedback about how I was navigating my personality, my perspectives of people, my prophetic ministry, and my connections with the church. And it was like, to this day, it was I'd count it as one of the most painful conversations I ever had, and also one of the most helpful conversations I ever had. And out of that conversation came many more conversations, much less painful, but it opened up a place for you to speak into my life and point out over the next several years, and even to this day at times, like, there's that thing right there I was talking to you about, that's the thing you do. I know you don't know you do it. I know you have a good heart. But when you do this, you think this is what people are thinking, but that's not what they're thinking. And you remember that conversation we had?
Oh yeah, yeah, I do. I faithful are the wounds of a friend, right?
Yeah.
So I do remember that. It was that very thing where I'm trying to influence you, and you're trying not to defend yourself against that influence, and the success of that leads to a pretty big revelation that you built a lot of stuff into. And that, I think, the grace on a pastor classically
Yeah.
is, yeah, I got to come in and I got to stick these scissors down your nose, sheep, but I'm going to grab that sinus worm and I'm going to pull it out, and you're going to be able to breathe again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that, faithful are the wounds of a friend, deceitful are the kisses of an enemy. And I just want to say, like, I mean, we love each other. We are close brothers, and we've had some painful moments together. And I want to really encourage, we have a lot of people watching. We have a lot of pastors, interacting with us. And one of the things I really appreciate about you, and I think in some ways this really saved my life and definitely molded my life, is that you've had the courage to step in and give feedback. And maybe I wouldn't say it's always been right, but it gives me a mirrors back. Hey, what are you doing? What do you think you're doing? And let me tell you how ineffective you are at what you think you're doing. And it's helped to make an adjustment, because oftentimes what you think you're doing and what you're actually accomplishing are not the same things.
And that's a back and forth. I mean,
yeah.
that goes both ways. I think it's covenant. When we stay open to covenant relationship, that we're surrounding ourselves with those voices. But I think part of the pastoral is to protect the health of that covenant, because sometimes covenant relationships turn into steel boxes that are really not healthy.
Yeah.
And in the name of covenant, there's crazy control and punishment in there. So the pastor's job is to help that, but keep it healthy. Like Jay does a great job of keeping those things healthy, but they're very much present in confrontation, direct communication, strong bonds that come from that.
Yeah. I was thinking about how pastors often feel smaller than a prophet, or less than, or, it's like sometimes they're not having, profound miracles, or, they're not meeting with God in the heavenlies. And that, how often I see pastors talk about the sense of being intimidated by even the younger, less experienced prophet or prophetess in their congregation, and the prophet or prophetess is making a mess, and it doesn't even have to be them, but some spiritual person, and the pastor's like, I don't get words of knowledge like that. I don't do miracles like that. And they withdraw from the relationship, instead of stepping in and saying, hey, Johnny boy, let me tell you, you may have a great prophetic ministry, but let me tell you how the damage you're doing to the flock. Talk about that. Speak to pastors for a couple of minutes around that whole subject of withdrawing instead of stepping in.
Yeah, well, I think that Tom Brady is way more sexy than his offensive line, but you think about what happens to Tom Brady without it.
Yeah, exactly.
So it is a position on the team, kind of a mindset that you hold, and especially in an apostolic prophetic environment, because you don't have the microphone much. You have it some, but not much. When you're the senior pastor in a pastor teacher environment, you're up there every week, and so you got the sexy role. So pastor's really sexy, but in an apostolic prophetic environment, the pastors aren't very sexy. You know,
Yeah,
they're very much workhorses, but they aren't getting the, you know, the, hey, take a
that
picture
boys.
with me. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it is a different role, but it's super important. And I think that a healthy team is very much locked onto the position that I play on that team. I have a job to do. That's my job, and I will do it.
and I'd like to just encourage pastors and teachers and evangelists, like, your role is every bit as spiritual as the prophet, the apostle, like every bit as
Absolutely.
spiritual, like
Absolutely.
loving people, taking care of people, counseling people, protecting the environment, all of those things that threefold ministry is kind of famous for. Like, that is every bit as powerful as the prophet gets a word of knowledge and can call out your phone number. I mean, that's all cool, but the truth is that we need each other, and there's no like, well, this is the highest level over here. You're the apostle. No, it's like we're all working together to see the flock grow and to equip the flock.
Yeah.
Danny, I love you, and I'm so thankful for you being on. And
Thanks, buddy.
you've
I love you
built a
too.
whole entire pastoral culture at Bethel that we still enjoy to this day. You still help oversee it, but you're in Sacramento, but that your legacy is living live here. I want to encourage folks that we've got a School of the Prophets coming up in August. We're actually the campus. We have an online and on campus. The on campus is sold out because obviously we have a limited number of seats because of the virus and so on and so forth. The online is still wide open. And by the way, what we've done this year in the School of the Prophets, we've been doing it for 15 years, Dano McCallum and I. And this year we've done something really, really powerful and unique. We've taken all the essentials that basically take us 3 days out of the 5 to teach at the School of Prophets. Simple things like, what's the difference between a prophet and the gift of prophecy, and how do I build a prophetic team, and how do you judge prophecy? All the things you need to know, but are that we call them the foundations or the essentials. We've taken all those and we've taught them. We teach them. As soon as you sign up, you're actually in the school. We're giving you materials. You're online. We have interactive events, online communities, online ministry time to you, interactive forums. You're having an immersive experience. So as soon as you sign up, you're actually in the School of Prophets. You're learning the essentials for that entire time. And then when we go to that 1 week of the School of the Prophets, we are doing the advanced prophets. And so we're super excited because every year Daniel and I do this, and we always leave going, oh man, half the stuff we wanted to teach this year, we didn't have time to do. So it's going to be super cool. It's whether you're online, if it's online, you're still going to have immersed experience. It's not going to be a second class experience. And you can find out more stuff. They have it right here, so I've written down for me. Go to bethel.com/prophets. You can learn more about it there. You can actually even join a group before you even sign up for the conference. Or it's actually not a conference. It's actually a class. It's a school. And love to see you there. Danny, thanks again. God bless you and your family. And I'll see you soon.
Thanks, buddy.
Bye, everybody. God bless.
Bless you. Bye bye.